Yeah, we're at Kindred Coffee Shop, drinking coffee.
Some of us are. Some of us don't like coffee.
And also I didn't bring sunscreen.
Well, we'll try to make this quick. Many short episodes, right?
Yeah.
Like 10 minutes or less, just kind of addressing topics that maybe people have reached out with, and maybe we don't need to beat like crazy with a 45-minute talk. So something short, something quick, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah, one of the questions that we got, at least one of the first ones, was, does Satan know your thoughts, or does he know what you're thinking, or does he know what's in your mind?
Right.
Or did he know, or does he know that we would meet here and talk about this?
Right.
Things of that sort.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. In fact, I've heard it posed before in a different way, like that. Should we not say things out loud?
Yeah.
Right? Like, because Satan, can he maybe hear, but maybe he doesn't read our thoughts? And how do we answer that question? So, and why does it matter? So, okay.
Yeah, why does that matter?
Well, I think just from a spiritual warfare position, like it's almost kind of like the enemy. You don't want the enemy to know your tactics, kind of thing. You know, like, okay, if he could possibly hear us, or he's got his minions and this demonic army out there, and they could hear our thought or could hear our conversation, maybe we want to be more strategic with what we say and what we don't, that kind of thing. I think that was kind of the spirit of the question.
Yeah.
I've heard it posed kind of related to maybe like C.S. Lewis, Screw Tape Letters. Like, you have this idea of, hey, these things are going on behind the scenes, and do we need to be more careful or strategic about what we say, how we say it?
Yeah.
So what can Satan?
Well, I've also and another question to throw in there. That way we kind of get I don't know, maybe we can get the whole realm of what's probably being asked here. I've even heard people begin prayers by addressing Satan at the beginning. Like, Satan, we rebuke you, or Satan, we bind you.
Wow. Is that biblical?
No.
Okay.
I would say.
I was making sure that wasn't you that was doing that.
No, that wasn't me this morning. No. Yeah, but of course, we would reject that. That's unbiblical, addressing Satan in prayer. Mm-hmm. But generally speaking, back to where we started here, does Satan know what we are thinking? Is he present everywhere?
Right.
Is he omniscient and all of those things? Well, I think we clearly argue no.
Of course not.
No.
But that's not just that in and of itself is not a satisfactory answer, because I think there's more that can be said about that, right? Like, Satan is not God, so Satan is not omniscient, he's not omnipresent, but Satan does have demons and is present through the forces of evil throughout the earth. So how do we kind of couch that question or that answer in that way?
Satan, he's not God. He doesn't have attributes of God. He's limited to one place at one time. So I guess technically, if he was here right now,
which he's not concerned with you.
I think he's probably up to something of more importance than sitting in a coffee shop.
Yeah, there are greater battles for Satan than the Informal Informants podcast.
Yeah.
Right. But
so we'd argue Satan, Job chapter 1, Job chapter 2, Revelation chapter 12. He's essentially going back and forth from heaven to the earth, conversing back and forth with God. You can read that in Job 1 and Job 2. I don't think he's necessarily concerned about the conversation that we're having here.
Right.
He would be up to more, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and think about Satan originally. As he was created, he's an angelic being, right? Well, the word that's translated as angel for us is the same word as messenger. Right. Yeah. So what did the angels do in Scripture? Of course, we'll have a separate episode where we maybe talk about angels and maybe touch on some of these things more broadly. But angels are ministering spirits we see in Hebrews. But mainly their goal, their task, Hebrews 1:14,
1:14.
Their task is to proclaim a message. In heaven, that message is the glory of God. That's what they do. They're surrounding the throne. They're worshiping. But when angels interact with humanity, they're always bringing a message from God Himself. Like, they are just messengers. That's their they are just messengers. And so to consider that Satan has a power and ability, like, certainly there's spiritual power There's supernatural activity that happens. But to suggest that Satan has some kind of omniscience or some kind of creative power is to misunderstand the angelic being altogether, right?
Yeah. And even, I think Satan probably understands that about himself, that he doesn't possess the attributes of deity, because in Isaiah 14, if that passage is talking about Satan or Lucifer, I guess there's some controversy over that particular name. Remember, he says, I want to be like the Most High. I want to be like God. I think what he's getting at there, to some degree, well, he isn't like God. He wants to be like him, though.
Right. And then I think one other factor that we need to consider when you think about, like, okay, should we be careful not to say certain things because we don't want Satan to hear or know or whatever else? Well, think about this. Satan has been on the earth for 6,000 years, we would say, right? Like, he's been observing humanity, and Romans 1 teaches me that humanity hasn't really changed all that much. Like, Satan doesn't need to hear me say that I'm tempted in X, Y, and Z.
Right.
Like, I'm a man in 2019, and the same struggles of sex, power, money, whatever else, that's what humanity has struggled with for ages. And so to suggest that somehow I shouldn't verbalize, well, I'd be tempted if I did that. Oh, and now Satan will tempt me with that.
Right.
Like, he didn't need me to tell him that, right? Like, he's paid attention. He's been around on this earth. He's the prince of this world right now. And so there's certainly, he doesn't need me to tell him, right? Like, that's just, we're humanity, sin. Like, those things are constant.
And that's the emphasis of the New Testament, is for humanity to be concerned about their own flesh and their own sin. Not necessarily hiding things from Satan, because if he does see a sinful act, or he knows a sinful thought, which, again, we would argue he doesn't know our thoughts.
Yeah, he doesn't, right.
The New Testament just doesn't emphasize, or the old, Satan or demons being that particular way.
Well, and I think, kind of in closing, the last thing I would say on the subject, I believe, and of course I didn't really know what we were going to talk about, so I didn't get to check my source here, but I believe Calvin refers to Satan.
Here he goes.
refers to Satan as like a dog on a leash, and I think that picture is so. It's so just captures that relationship that God has with Satan. Like, Satan is bound by God's limitations anyway. Like Job chapter 1, right? Like God is the one who initiates and says, "Hey, why don't you do this?" And Satan is just running around doing the bidding of God. And to suggest or to think that Satan is like we're at war, but God's in control.
Yeah.
And so I think when we have those perspectives in their proper place, we're less concerned with whether or not Satan. I'm not really concerned with what Satan's doing.
No.
Right? Like, I don't need to be. I need to be aware, but it shouldn't capture my thoughts. It should be. I should be concerned with who God is and worshiping Him.
Yeah, Satan and demons, they're under the sovereignty of God.
Exactly.
Right? God's not going to let anything happen to us that is outside of His own control.
Of course.
Even with those things.
Yep.